Welcome back, Commander.
Insufficient funds. Reinforcements have arrived.
Have you ever wondered if sometimes science has gone too far? That's the experiment for today. It seems that maybe not entirely at the Soviets' insistence, but the eternal search for a more powerful and just better version of a mammoth tank has yielded some interesting results. Sadly, though, before we can see such beautiful masterpieces, we have to sort of maybe explore and capture some stuff on the map. Oh, and unfortunately, we're not given enough engineers, so you have to go the good old building damage route. On the plus side, though, it's actually nice that the game, like this scenario, has that built in. As, again, when do thieves ever really come into play?
Awaiting order. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very well.
Unit ready.
Vehicle reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledge. At one. Very well. Vehicle reporting.
It may not look like it, but that little scoop of what the testing area looked like is kind of a good idea for a future game. But we'll see that eventually. So no need to worry about when specifically.
Vehicle reporting. Affirmative.
I'm surprised that the V2 didn't actually shoot. I was certain that it would, but I mean, I'll take its pacifism.
Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Vehicle reporting. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Reporting. Acknowledged. Reporting. Yes, sir. At once. Reporting. Ready and waiting. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Vehicle reporting. Vehicle reporting. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Awaiting orders.
One thing that is possible, since silos work on the overall total of funds that an enemy has, technically there's nothing stopping me from building a barracks next to the power plant, since it is mine and generates controlled land or buildable land. Nothing stopping me from building a barracks and then just constantly pumping out thieves and stealing the AI's funds.
Awaiting orders. Acknowledged.
It does seem a little cheesy, but maybe that's just an oversight that the devs never really thought about the AI selling its stuff afterwards.
Reconstruction option.
Awaiting orders.
Then again, I don't even recall. I don't even get thieves. And I can't build, but that's besides the point.
Yes, sir. Awaiting orders.
Building. Training.
You'll note that there's another issue that we can see pretty much immediately.
On hold.
I have no money.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely none. And that's particularly annoying. I doubt there's any real justification for it either.
Acknowledged.
It just seems to be a means to hold you back.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
It also brings up another issue, which is somehow, for whatever reason, whoever did the main work on this mission apparently really enjoyed the lack of respawning resources, because we are nowhere near anything that's economically viable.
Unit ready.
Yes, sir. Indeed.
Thankfully, we won't be under the same constraints as a future level, because if that was the case, I don't know how you'd ever beat it.
My way.
Building.
Yes, sir. For king and country. Commander.
So sadly, we're not at a point where the game will just like move your vision to a location. So there's issues such as there is a nice area that seemed to be where the two super tanks are basically just testing stuff out. But unless you actually think to look there at the specific time where it's actually shown, you kind of miss out on it completely. I mean, the same technically applies to the marker on the bottom at the village.
Awaiting orders. Acknowledge.
Like, it just showed up, and it'd be nice if that was maybe signposted just a little bit better.
Yes, sir. Acknowledge. Reporting. Acknowledge. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Insufficient funds.
Yes, affirmative. Awaiting order. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Reporting. Acknowledge. Yes, sir.
Ready.
Reporting. Acknowledge.
Well, hopefully I can find some new source of income, or else I'll probably be hearing that little warning very often.
Unit lost.
Yes, acknowledge.
Probably not the right time to be losing any units either.
Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Yes, sir. Acknowledge. Awaiting orders. Yes, sir. Acknowledge.
Training.
Awaiting orders. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Yes, sir. Acknowledge.
It doesn't help that I'm also pumping money into getting spies, which is kind of not always good. Just because I typically either suck with spies or I get them killed, which I guess technically is the same general idea. It's pretty ambitious for the developers to give you 3 empty silos to start off with. Like, I don't know anybody who's stockpiling enough cash to ever actually do that.
Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative.
But speaking of cash and
Yes, sir. Acknowledge. Reporting.
maybe making some income on the side, there's some nice trucks here. And we know for a fact that trucks generally have something nice in them.
Reporting.
Maybe if I hadn't screwed up my execution, though.
Reporting.
Mission sighted.
Waiting order. Affirmative. Commander. Reporting. Vehicle. Report. Yes, sir. Acknowledge.
Maybe that's what the silos are for, the massive infusion of cash. I believe each truck might have $2,000 in each of them, but I've never really looked at the exact values.
Unit ready. Building. Unit ready.
Yes, sir.
Another thing I missed the first time around is that there's no text to alert the player. And by that I mean these tanks are now on a warpath. A really serious warpath. Like, you don't want to mess with them. When they say that these tanks are, like, incredibly powerful, they're not joking around. Their armor is basically nigh invincible. Sure, they can take damage, but just about every damage is probably like 1 or 2, something very low. Oh, and 2 nukes just went off.
Unit ready. Building.
Yes, sir. Reporting.
It's interesting because the super tanks, I guess we'll just call them, have the same sound as the cruiser guns, which implies that that's what they use. Mainly because, as far as I'm aware, unless you go like heavy into just modifying stuff, you'd have to create like a new sound file, and I don't believe that's the case. I bet it was something closer to changing the attack type, and if anything, maybe changing the speed at which things go. You can also see just by the arc of the shots that it's meant to be that sort of cruiser shot rather than tanks, because a tank would have something more direct than the slight arc from the super tanks that we can see. It's interesting too that the Soviets apparently had some sort of backup plan to nuke themselves and the tanks that they made, which is probably indicative of why it's a terrible idea to create such a thing. I mean, you see it in a lot of different movies and books where, you know, they're searching for the perfect killer or weapon, and they make something that's nigh indestructible, and apparently they never think what would happen if it went rogue. And then, of course, because the trope is that they inevitably do go rogue and can't be destroyed unless it's like magic serum or something. For whatever reason, I had it in my head that the super tanks would actually attack me as well, and I think I just like thought that because of something that may have happened like 20 years ago, and I just never thought otherwise. Oh, and yeah, this is the smart way to do it. Sure, you could get an APC and all that, but why not just send the chopper down south? Sadly, you can't cheese the mission with the transport. There's no area for you to, you know, drop or pick up anybody from. I kind of wonder if this was just an oversight, because there's very few occasions where you're actually allowed to control the Chinook. And since the AI doesn't have anything to stop you from it taking its sweet time to get off the map, it looks like we may have just won this one. Inadvertently, anyways.
Objective met. Reinforcements have arrived. Mission accomplished.